I think that weight loss drugs, they create a window of opportunity. So not a solution, but a kind of window. And I think that this is really important from operators and trainers' point of view. So when that appetite pressure drops, people finally have a bit of mental bandwidth. And this is a really good moment to install habits.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. Today, we welcome back Dr. Heather McKee, a behavioral scientist who supported more than 100 companies worldwide in applying behavioral science to real-world products, experiences, and engagement strategies. With more members now using GLP-1 medications, operators are facing a behavioral shift inside their facilities. Weight loss becomes easier, food urgency drops, willpower matters less, and the traditional cues gyms rely on to understand progress or predict retention don't tell the full story anymore. On the episode, Heather will help gym owners understand three essential things: what GLP-1 members need once weight is no longer their main driver, how reduced reliance on willpower changes habit formation and long-term adherence, and how to spot early signs of satisfaction or disengagement. If you want a clear science-backed playbook for GLP-1 members in 2026, this conversation is for you. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. I'm your host, Krissy Vann, and this is ATFW. I am so pleased to have you back on the show, Heather. Last time we were talking a lot about member behavior, wearables, how that plays into retention. And this year we're going to be shifting into a space that was one of the most talked about influences on the fitness industry through last year, GLP-1s. But before we dive in, maybe just give people a little bit of an overview about your specialty and how you apply it to the fitness industry, because you were a wealth of information for us.
Thanks, Krissy. And I'm really excited to be back for 2026 and to be discussing this with you as well. Last time your questions blew me away, so I'm sure it's going to be a really valuable conversation again. So I'm a behavioral scientist. So I'm focused on, how people build habits, how they sustain motivation, how they stay engaged long term. I work with brands all over the world, helping them embed behavioral science into what they do. So if it's a digital health platform, using behavioral science to help create more engagement and better long-term metrics, whether it's training, gym staff in behavioral change techniques or behavioral change communication to help them actually maintain positive relationships with their members, but also use the right techniques to actually help people create those lifelong habits. And I think in terms of the context of this conversation, what's really interesting about GLP-1s is not just what they do biologically, but how they change that psychological landscape. And I think that's really where the gyms and the trainers and the environments become more important, not less. So that's really, my interest in this piece.
Well, and I'm glad that you shared that, because you and I were doing a little bit of chatting back and forth via email before getting into this conversation. And, the scope of how we talk about GLP-1 is so important in this space, because it is a medication that's prescribed by doctors. And, the fitness industry has been trying to find its footing of where is our place in this conversation. So today is really about the behavior around it. And I love that you highlight it does change the psychological landscape. A lot of times, especially this time of year, someone's walking into the gym and weight loss year over year, when they do the surveys of what are people's goals when they're walking into those spaces, that tends to be number one. Now there's a medication that results in weight loss. And
Mm.
so if weight loss feels less urgent for someone as a goal, what new behavioral needs tend to surface more clearly, and how can gyms respond to these?
I think that weight loss drugs, they create a window of opportunity. So not a solution, but a kind of window. And I think that this is really important from operators and trainers' point of view. So when that appetite pressure drops, people finally have a bit of mental bandwidth. And this is a really good moment to install habits. So, other kind of human needs become more audible because that food noise has been kind of crowded out. And normally, and anyone who's ever been on a diet will know this, your food and your weight loss noise, it dominates your attention. It's that chatter in the back of your head. Have I eaten too much? Have I eaten too little? Am I hungry? Am I not? And actually being able to quiet that noise using these weight loss drugs helps people kind of get back to actually having the headspace, getting back to their own identity, their confidence, their competence, their routine. That allows things to come forward. And it kind of new needs surface then, as you say, structure. So what am I training for now? Capability, am I learning to move well, not just burn calories? And the added confidence from weight loss, brings more people in as well, more people that maybe wouldn't be gym goers in the past. But we still need to be aware that actually a lot of these people may not have very much competence or confidence in the gym environment. They may not have ever really engaged in exercise before. There was an article in the Financial Times this weekend that talked about, gyms in the UK are now training their trainers in empathetic communication and more of these kind of motivational needs to help actually support people with that competence. And the final thing I think that's really important is meaning. And people are no longer just looking at those extrinsic outcomes like their weight on the scale, but intrinsic outcomes like longevity, like aging well, like strength, like energy, stress relief even. And I think, our language then shifts as operators, as trainers, from outcomes to experience. And so what we need to kind of focus on now is that skill building, helping people feel safe, helping people feel competent, rewarding consistency, not focusing on body change. Because whilst GLP-1s can lower the volume on hunger, behavior change is what teaches someone how to live well once that noise gets quieter.
Yeah, you bring up such a good point there too on the competence, because what a lot of these GLP-1 patients are hearing as well is the importance of going to a fitness facility, not for weight loss, but to lift weights for lean
Mm.
muscle mass, because we know that, yes, it's reducing fat, but it also reduces muscle. And to your point, even for anyone walking to the gym for the first time, it's easy to walk up and press start on a treadmill. We all can figure that out. But when it comes to actually learning the fundamentals of weightlifting, it can be really overwhelming and intimidating. So keeping that at the forefront of the mind so that you can provide that experience to break that barrier becomes
Mm.
essential. Now, another element that generally a lot of people use as fuel when they start at the gym is willpower. But in GLP users, it changes the way they should think about habit formation. So, how does that kind of play into long term gym engagement? Because it's not necessarily a willpower thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, I'll just go back to what you said there because it really made me think. One thing that we're really bad at in the fitness industry is understanding what it's like for people that aren't mad for fitness, that aren't crazy for fitness. And I think that our biases have a real impact on how we support other people. And so for any trainers out there, and I've met a lot of amazing trainers that are really focused on this thing, it's really helpful just to think about someone in your family that might be in the position of that client. Think it's about an aunt, an uncle, a sister, a cousin, whatever it happens to be, a friend, and imagine, you understand them, their lifestyle, their background. And so it can really just help support you, to help you support that person better. Because often when we're kind of termed as the expert, we get into this expert role and actually we lose that ability to empathize and really walk a day in our members' shoes. And I think that that's a really huge part of the competence piece as well. In terms of the willpower piece, I think the important thing is that, like, GLP-1, it doesn't remove habits, it removes like friction to engagement in habits. And so, like, ultimately, willpower was never the solution anyway. I often say willpower is like a muscle. If I went to the gym for the next week, just training my right bicep, by the time I get to this day next week, I wouldn't be able to pick up a cup of tea. But if I went once a week for the next 7 weeks, giving myself adequate rest and recovery, I get stronger over time. And that's the same with habits. They form through this cue, routine, reward, rest, recovery, not just consistent and constant effort. And that's why these willpower based models, they blow up on people and they break down. And I've seen that in a lot of digital health apps. I've seen it in physical environments, and I'm often then brought in to save people that have or organizations that have focused way too much on motivation, and they focus on these first 3 months, and then they actually aren't creating that sustainability. And so what we need to refocus on is environments that make behavior easier, especially when people's biology is changing. And what I mean by that is, less white knuckling, less pressure towards certain outcome measures, more choice for people. So, what's that look like in practical level? Okay, asking people what actually fits your life. What do you enjoy enough to repeat? Because now that noise is gone from, I have to lose weight, I have to do what's most effective to lose weight. You can actually start to really understand activity and get to know and fall in love with activity. And that is all we want to do as behavioral scientists. We just want to help people find joy in those healthy habits. And I think one thing that a lot of the fitness industry has historically done really badly is that they over reward intensity. And actually studies, there's a really incredible researcher, I'm going to botch his name now, but it's Ekikakis. It's a Greek name. I always seem to get it wrong, but he has incredible studies that show that intensity matching, so actually matching at a level that the person feels competent at, is so important to enjoyment. But then how many of us have, had a friend or a family member that's joined a gym and they're like, okay, I'm just going to look for the most punishing or the hardest machine, or, oh, the assault bike, that looks really hard, or high intensity interval training, that feels really like dramatic. Like, that's the thing I'm going to have to do, rather than actually taking a step back and saying, well, what is it that I'm going to actually enjoy? And the gyms put that pressure on people, and the fitness apps and the platforms, they put that pressure on people because they over reward intensity. But intensity doesn't matter if you're not actually adhering to it long term. And, we over index on physiology, and, something may be great for our physiology, but if our psychology, if our head isn't in it, we're not going to consistently show up. And so we need to start designing for different intensities, allowing people to actually match the intensity that works for them and not feel like a failure. When we think about real world behavioral design, we think about low energy days. I always talk about, what's your minimum viable habit? What's your minimum viable workout? We always think about our workouts on this, 10 out of 10. I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to lift 3 days a week. But like, that's only in circumstances that allow you to do that. So what happens on a day when you've got less time, less energy, less bandwidth? What's a 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? It might be just swinging a kettlebell while your kettle boils for your coffee. But we have to start thinking about actually helping support people to do these. And what's interesting about the research is that actually the more exercise and movement people do at home, the actually more adherent they are to the gym too, which is really quite interesting. And so it's not a threat to us. It's not going to take people away. It's actually helping build more a holistic view of moving, of working out, of physical activity. So we need to kind of start designing for that consistency, because ultimately, if we bring it back to GLP-1s, they don't create habits. They give people the mental space to choose better ones. So we need to set up the environment so that it's a friendly environment for that. And I would say that this doesn't just work for people that are on, weight loss medications. This works for anyone that we're trying to get in the gym door. And actually, one of the main reasons that people disengage is due to shame, because they feel like they've let someone down. They've let you as an organization down. They've let themselves down. But actually, if we allow people to understand that flexibility is normal, failure is normal, and actually it's what they do afterwards that's the most important part, it's much more likely we're going to get more adherent members and better long-term outcomes for them.
Let's expand a little bit about gym environments,
Mm,
because I know you are, I mean, you said it there. You have spent a career where you intervene in some organizations where these subtleties can make a massive difference in regards to retention and getting someone to adhere. So, how can gyms create environments that feel supportive and valuable to people at different stages of change without requiring anyone to disclose their medication use? Because that's the other part. It's been
yeah.
interesting in GLP because I think that the stigma has definitely changed at a rapid pace. And obviously, pop culture has a lot to do with that. The fact that social media exists, people are
Mm,
participating in forums. But at the same time, you said shame has been the name of the game for a
mm,
lifetime. And so some people may feel shame if they've decided to use this as an intervention. Personally, I don't feel as
mm.
though they should. But at the same time, it's something that's very real and exists.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. Again, a lot of us have been lifelong movers. So, we haven't experienced that feeling in a long while. Maybe if we've had an injury, or we're returning from parental leave or a break away, we might experience that to an extent, and we really need to lean into that and actually understand that and capture that for when we are then working again with members and clients, to really kind of, as I say, walk a day in their shoes. I think it's the stuff we talked about. It's like, we can normalize that people's energy is going to change. We can normalize that we can show people how to scale back their sessions when they have less time, less energy, less cognitive cognitive capacity. We can show rest as intelligent, not lazy. The best athletes in the world prioritize recovery. And I think the language is getting a lot better around that. We talk a lot about like today's versions counts and meet yourself where you are. And I think one of the key ways in which we can influence that is focus on creating a supportive social environment. And I think, some gyms are incredible at doing this. And it's actually just about helping people feel safe, helping them feel like they can show up, they can talk to you, whether it's about, and I think we talked about this on the last podcast, even if it's just talking about what show you watched over the weekend, or your favorite sports team. It doesn't have to just be about fitness all of the time, but actually be helping someone feel seen goes a huge way towards actually engaging them. And actually, interesting research in weight loss medications shows that the strongest association with the bigger impacts, more significant weight loss happened in individuals that had more relationship orientated engagement. So they either had a health coach, they had a client, they were connected with other people that were similar to them, but that expedited their success on these weight loss medications as well. And we know that for people that aren't on medications, that having this feeling, we call it behavioral psychology, of relatedness. So feeling that you're part of something bigger than just you. That you're seen, you're heard, you're recognized. We see it in, big fitness platforms like Peloton. A classic phrase that Peloton uses, "I see you." And they know behavioral psychology. They know helping someone feel like they're important, that they're special. Rewarding them showing up is why they stay. Helping people feel safe is why they stay. And when they feel judged, they disappear. So we need to kind of get rid of those old mindsets, the old no pain, no gain, and move way more onto, we see you, we're ready to match you with whatever energy you're bringing today. And I think the best gyms, they don't ask why someone needs flexibility. They just build it in anyway, regardless of where that member is at in their journey.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because you mentioned earlier a lot of times the models were around like, what are you working toward? I mean, we see the expansion of high rocks, for example, tons of people moving through because they want to accomplish a fitness race. I used to do bodybuilding shows way back in the day, which is a whole other diatribe. But the reality of that, it's rewarding restriction and intense exercise, and then you get to the goal. And this is a very different experience, as you mentioned. It's about this habit building, but it means that there more than likely needs to be a change of language when it comes to how fitness facilities, gym operators, personal trainers look alongside in regards to those feedback loops of what is a success marker, because it's no longer these defined benchmarks of yesteryear. That
Yeah.
language is changing. So how can they still feel progress when body composition changes, especially when they start to slow or stabilize? Because the goal for GLP users isn't to just keep going down, down, down. At some point, they're going to be in that target space.
Yeah, and I think that's for anyone actually with any fitness goal. And I think that's where most gyms lose people as well. And I think we don't talk enough about the behavioral truth that is, bodies plateau. Bodies will plateau, but our habits don't have to. We can keep, creating those incremental changes. We can keep creating progress, but we have to understand our physiological limits, that over time our bodies will plateau. And that might happen for months on end, and then there is some sort of breakthrough. But if we use that as our metric alone, we're just going to lead to failure. So we need to get people to focus on the processes and the habits that they do day in, day out. And so alternative success markers could be, strength gains, confidence using equipment, internal challenges within the organization, recovery time, recovery bounce back, mood, sleep, stress management, even getting the person to develop their own personal intuition where they're like, understanding how their energy has changed. What are the things they can do now that they weren't able to do before? The functionality of what engagement is giving them. And I always look for, and we often look for this as researchers and studies, we look for statements around identity as well. So I'm someone who trains, I'm someone who lifts, I'm someone who, likes to go to the gym. Those kind of words as well are huge success markers. I did a long-term study of looking at people that were able to successfully lose weight long-term and those that regained it over time. It's a clinically significant amount of weight loss. And what we found was that those that were most successful were the people that then identified with a healthy lifestyle. They weren't identifying with the weight on the scales. They were identifying with, I just love the feeling of being fit and active. I understand what it contributes to my life. I see what it gives me back, and I can see the new things I'm able to do as a result of that. And so I think, having reflective check-ins, not just weigh-ins, is very, very important. And that's where, staff training comes in to kind of help and ask the right questions around that. But even a simple question like, what contribution does actually getting active and staying active have in your life? What does it give you back? Even that, or even asking people like, how is your energy been since you started? Those kind of reflective check-ins, it trains our own personal intuition muscles, but it also helps us look outside of those objective measures. I think having progress conversations, not progress photos, is very, very important, as we all know, and we've learned that, haven't we? Even like, a huge move in that direction was when Noom got rid of the before and after images of Weight Watchers previously. And then, celebrating maintenance as success. I think that's the next step for people. And it's not something that we do a lot at the moment. I like to say maintenance isn't failure, it's mastery. And I'd love for us to rebrand being in a maintenance phase as actually, the pinnacle of showing up. It's that consistency irrespective of those outcome results. And that shows a real resilience mindset. And so I think the thing is, these weight loss medications, they change like our fundamentals of our behavior. So long-term success still comes from creating those environments where, showing up feels positive, where showing up feels meaningful, showing up feels human. And if we can emphasize that to people and actually reinforce that, we're just going to help bolster, their long-term success.
I really like what you highlight there in regards to maintenance because it's true. It almost feels like a throwaway term or less than or discounted, but
Mm,
even your research kind of prove it's the most fundamental part and often where we lose people. And the
yeah.
other thing I appreciate I've seen play out in real time, I have a good friend of mine, I've known her since grade 6, and she has been so excited to be on her weight loss journey through GLPs. It was kind of that classic tale of having tried everything and felt so much failure and shame. And so to be able to see progress, and she's been very open about it with me. And I've been curious because obviously I talk about it so much with the industry. But the
Mm,
thing I thought that was so cool is when I went to her home, she was so excited to show me, oh, these are the greens that I'm taking, and this is the workout that I'm doing. And I've been so sore. And there was this sense of excitement about not just the shifts that she was seeing from the medication that she was doing every day, but how it truly was transforming her entire lifestyle and
mm,
being ultimately a part of something that truthfully she felt excluded from.
yeah.
And the industry didn't help. It did feel exclusive. And the
Mm,
language has a need to change to inclusive, which is happening in real time. We know we go to conferences, this is at the forefront. This is kind of a subjective question, but when you look at GLP-1 for the industry, so many people have felt this is going to be the big game changer for us. Do you think that the industry is aware enough of the behavioral changes that people are going through on these medications to make that possible, or are we still missing the mark in the conversation?
Yeah, I think the concern here is that these medications are effective while people stay on them. But not everyone can stay on them forever. And so if they don't learn the behavioral changes while they're on them before they go on them, they're very unlikely to actually be able to sustain and maintain the results that they've got. I know in the longer term studies, and we haven't got a huge amount of longer term studies, but weight regain is common unless behavior changes in place, and some people can cycle on and off for a while as well. But the good news is that we know that structured exercise programs, like, they foster good regulation, a positive relationship with your body, and they promote sustained engagement even after pharmaceutical intervention stops. But as we all know, as operators, physical activity adherence is a major challenge. It's often limited, like I say, by perceived effort, by time constraints, and by lack of behavioral support. And so I think the industry is actually getting quite good at this, that understanding that we cannot provide these medications in isolation alone. They have to come with a supportive structure of movement, of nutrition, and of psychology. And so, my recommendation would be, obviously, as a behavioral scientist, to integrate behavioral change training for staff, counseling, psychological monitoring, things like motivational interviewing, using cognitive behavioral strategies to actually help people, while that noise is quieted down, actually understand more about their personal habits, why they act in a specific way in relation to food, and actually look to heal those relationships. There's also a great place for digital adherence tools here. They can have a massive impact on outcomes as well. And, if people, whilst they're still taking the drugs, are learning and creating those habits, and they're just set up in a much better way to then actually have more long-term success. Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have those 5-10 year data yet. And, what we need to do is work on building those skills, building those habits in this crucial window, because that's what's going to help people actually really get to grips with this long term.
Yeah, I mean, we're all learning in real time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 5, 10, 15 years. And we do have the data. Heather, I'm so appreciative of this info on GLP-1. But before I leave you, on a personal note, because I know that you're always diving in to discover what makes us tick in gym environments, as you're traveling into 2026, where's kind of your focus research-wise, or what are you most excited about that you're diving into?
Great question. Oh my gosh. I think what I'm quite excited about, and I'm working with a lot of companies on at the moment, is this idea of flexibility. I think that's kind of been front of mind, and I'm doing a webinar on it tomorrow. Interestingly, with high performers, so people that are quite adherent to their sport but are trying to bring in other elements and other habits, and it equally affects them as it does new movers, because a lot of us have this kind of all or nothing mindset. If I can't make it to the gym, if I can't do my exact full workout, if I can't do X amount of time, then it's not worth it at all. And actually having that level of flexibility, and there's so much research, and it's coming out day after day after day to show that habits honed with flexibility are ultimately those ones that stick. And so, it's a lesson I learned the hard way when I was a new parent, because, being a habit specialist, I had quite high standards for myself around my habits, and I had to drop those standards. So what I would say to anyone listening is, think about what is your minimum viable habit for the thing that you want to create change for this year. Don't just think about it at the 10 out of 10 on the scale, like we said. Think about it as the 1, 2, and 3, because actually it's that showing up, keeping that habit alive. It's creating that consistency that actually, trains our brain that this is something we want to do time and time and time again. And so it's not a failure if you do a 1, 2, or 3. In fact, it's keeping that habit fuel lit. And so, yeah, flexibility is something that I'm really focused on this year.
Incredible. Well, I'm sure we'll be reconnecting with you again on the podcast, because you really are a wealth of information. And we know that this space is always evolving in real time, which means we also need to adjust our habits with how we treat our members. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Krissy. It's such a delight.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Krissy Vann. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.